welcome to the Storied Human. Today I have a really cool guest, Jan Allen Ackley. He's the author of Searching for Change, a memoir of growing up in Appalachia. His book is a testament to his resilience and ability to overcome obstacles, find happiness, and inspire others. Jan's natural humor weaves through discussions of success, hardship, and overcoming life's obstacles. Jan is a multi-talented individual with an impressive track record spanning 34 years as a commercial finance and economic executive. With over 3 decades of corporate finance experience, Ackley has established himself as a go-to person for companies across the United States seeking to solve complex banking and finance problems. He rose to leadership in positions within the banking industry, developing relationships with companies across the United States. Welcome, Jan. It's so great to have you.
That's great to be here. Thank you for
I'm
having
excited to hear your story. I just have to say, your A to Z is pretty spectacular.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, your beginnings are, were kind of humble, right? And you grew up in an impoverished rural, I'm assuming it was impoverished or close to it,
Yeah,
rural
close to
area,
it. Yeah.
probably in some ways a beautiful way to grow up because I love being in nature. And I, believe it or not, I live in New Jersey, but I'm in a very beautiful rural area right near the Delaware River. Why don't you tell me, though, how that shaped you, what that was like?
Yeah, I like to talk about it. I grew up in southeastern Ohio, fairly close to the West Virginia border. And it's in, kind of, I call it the north central Appalachia area, and grew up in a single parent. I have 2 siblings, both older than me. My mother was divorced when I was very young, when I was a baby, and so growing up, pretty financially poor, but also not just financially. It's lack of fathers in the home.
Yeah.
My both grandfathers were killed in the coal mines or died in the coal mines in the
My
30s
God.
and 20s even. My mother grew up in an orphanage, and so it was a lack of
Wow.
just a lack of security of having 2 parents in the home, and not knowing what to do. As I grew, when I was young, and then when I grew into being a teenager, it's hard for a kid in that atmosphere to find their way forward.
I can't imagine because most of us, we have some kind of safety net or family support. You mentioned even your grandfathers were gone.
Right.
We take it for granted, that we have a fallback, people who will catch us and people who guide us. Without those support systems, it's hard to find your way.
Oh,
How
it
did you,
very much is.
what did you do? Like, was there a mentor who helped you or someone in your family who like influenced you?
Yeah, it's a great question, because a mentor is what I really needed. And I want to say when I was about 16 years old, I started going to a local church, and a local church there in the little town called Zanesville, Ohio, had some men in it that were just really good men. And they saw this poor 16-year-old kid with no dad, and they kind of took me under their wing. And I had never really been around men before then. The men that I was around, weren't that good of men, but these were good men, and it showed me that there were men in the world that were good, and they had families, and they were successful in business and so on, and they really mentored me and opened my thoughts to things I had never thought about before.
That's so good. There usually is someone, that's what I find with stories like this. There's somebody. Like my mother had a really tough childhood, but there was someone in her family, one particularly strong person who made the difference. And I think that's so cool that there were those good men that shared it with you, that showed you, like you
Yeah,
were able to model on them. We don't need our family. We just need somebody,
we need
we just need
somebody.
somebody
Yeah,
decent. Right. I
and
think
and
that's
God bless
wonderful.
my mother. God bless my mother. She tried, but she was limited in what she could do. She grew up like I say, in the 20s and late 20s and 30s and so on, with no dad and in a foster home. And
Hard.
so her way of thinking was limited as well by her
Yeah.
background. So it was kind of a generational thing that my family dealt with.
I think that's such a good point. It's so hard to break out of that sometimes because you
Very
have
much.
so few resources. It's about just surviving.
That's absolutely true. And when you're in that mode, Lynn, it's that's all you think about. Your world is very small, because
Yeah.
that's all you think about, and you don't think about the things of life that are like possibilities. What can I do?
Yeah.
What are my abilities that you don't really discover unless somebody helps you discover
Yeah.
them?
That's such a good point. You don't dream big, right?
No,
You don't know to
that's
dream.
exactly right. Yep.
So I'm just so struck by those men. Thank goodness for men like that.
Yes.
Um, so what did you end up doing? Like, did you go to college after that? Did they encourage you to
Yeah.
go to
So
college?
yeah. So really, it was uh, high school was really hard for me. Just not having a lot of. I had close friends, but it wasn't this broad friendships that you would typically have, and it was just a an odd time in life, and these men showed up at a really good time. I knew I needed to do something different than what my this is where my limited abilities, but that I had those, but I was smart enough to know what I lacked. And I saw from these men a lot of things that I knew I lacked, discipline and a lot of different things like that. In my senior year of high school, I enlisted in the Air Force and then Ohio National Guard because I
Yeah.
knew it was something that could be taught to me, and I needed that in my life at that time. And it
Yeah.
turned out to be one of the best things I could do, because the military taught me a lot of things that I did not know and I needed to experience. And that was the start of an important time for me.
That's so good. We were just talking about that. The military offers so many benefits and sometimes the only path out for students. It's a great way to start your journey.
It is,
And
and it
like,
wasn't. Go ahead. Sorry.
the discipline thing too. I didn't even think about that. But I mean, how would you know that, right? How would you know
Right.
that kind of discipline? And they really instill those values that it's hard to get those for anybody, I
It
think. We're
it
not.
is, and somebody like me, that the only thing I knew is that I needed to change the director or the direction of where I was headed.
Yeah.
My past, the generations before me were very limited, and it's kind of like being on this old dirt road, and it's a comfortable road, but that's all the road that I knew.
Yeah.
But I knew I had to get off of this exit ramp onto the major highway of life. And I don't know how else to explain it, but
Yeah.
something dramatic needed to happen for me to get off of that road, which I knew led to a certain place, and it wasn't that exciting. It was what my generations before me knew,
Yeah.
very limiting. So the military was that off ramp for me, the beginning of the off ramp for me, which led into a lot of other things beyond that. But that was the ramp that I took to build into me some things that I knew I needed at the time as an 18-year-old.
That's so great. And now look at you. I mean, I'm pretty impressed with your corporate career and you're an author. The book
Yeah.
sounds wonderful. When did you write the book?
Well, I wrote the book just about this whole topic because
Yeah.
I wrote the book about 12 years ago, and it
Okay.
really wasn't a. I didn't start out writing to make it a book. I started out I have I have 5 children and I have 8 grandchildren.
Oh, how wonderful.
12 years ago, the oldest grandchild was born, And I was in the hospital and I was sitting out in the, kind of the waiting area. And I remember sitting there alone thinking, what do grandfathers do? I had learned how to be a dad over the years by
Yeah.
trial and error, right? But I didn't know what a grandfather did. Never thought about being a grandfather, but there I was,
A
in
grandfather.
this room, and I thought, the only thing that I could come up with at that time was, I just want my granddaughter to know of these lessons that I learned over since I was a little kid, and I'll put those down on paper. And so I started taking notes. I found a pad and pen in the hospital. And I just started taking notes and reminiscing about things. And one of the cool things I did, when I was starting at about 18, I started keeping a journal. Um, at the time, my wife, and I knew each other since the seventh grade in junior high, but we started dating when I was 18. And so she gave me this journal. She said, Jan, you ought to write some things that are important to you as you go day to day. So I started to do that, and I kept a journal for a lot of years. So I reflected on those, or I looked at those, and more memories came out from that. And I just kept writing these notes for my granddaughter. And then I thought, well, my kids don't know these stories either, all
Nope.
my adult children. And so I started to tell some people about what I was doing at work, and they said, Jan, you have a really
Yeah.
unique, interesting background. You really ought to let other people read about this. You should think about writing a book. So it took me 11 years to write a book. Because of my limited time.
Yeah.
I am a business writer, or I was a business writer, not a writer that of in a way that people would be interested. So I had to get coaching. So I found some coaches in English that helped me to write, gave me some good advice on this book. And I had it fully written. They ripped it apart, took many chapters out, kind of reformulated it, but
Yeah.
um, it was quite the journey to get from point A to point B in writing this book. It took 11 years, and I published it a year and a half ago.
That's
So
fantastic.
it's on Amazon. It's getting
Good.
decent reviews and so on, but
I'm
I
not
think it is a
surprised.
story that many people need to hear.
It's a great story. And it's so smart of you to get coaches, because I have a friend who's writing a book right now. And I've talked to other people that say sometimes, even if you are a writer, you don't have that objectivity about your stuff, or you don't even know how a
You're
book should
spot
go
on.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's so smart of you to do that, because people need your story, and it's better because of that coaching. And I think it's so interesting how many different kinds of coaches we can have now. Somebody I just spoke my last interview was that I just published was a money life coach, Whitney Ellis. She wanted to be a life coach, but she had her own really intense experiences with money and not being good with money. And so
Yeah.
she grew something out of that. So I just think it's great when people support each other like that. So
Yeah. And
what was your, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to your point, Lynn, it's, one of the traits that I do have that's been very helpful is a little bit of humility. I always look for the things that I can improve upon or don't have to help me get where I want to go.
Yeah.
And these men, when I was a teenager, I knew what I lacked, or I had a good idea what I lacked. Then I went into the military. But with this book, I knew I needed a lot of coaching and English, people that were able to write well in that vein of telling a
Yeah.
story.
It's
Uh,
different. They literally
it's
have
very
classes
different.
on memoir writing. I mean, I'm a writer, a poet, creative writer, a technical writer. I would not attempt a memoir without help. It's a specific kind of writing. And
Yes.
there's rules and formatting, and there's like a way to spin your story. It's so cool. A lot of people think they're fine though without a coach. So I commend you for saying,
Oh,
I need some help. But I keep
yeah.
thinking of this quotation when you say that you saw what those men in church could offer you. You saw that you had lack. And it just reminds me of this quotation: is if you do what everyone else is doing, you'll have what everyone else has. And that's sort of what you did. I'm so impressed with that because you did it young. You looked around and said, my family has been, doing this hamster wheel kind of thing for years,
Yes.
right? And
Hmm.
it gets them here. So if I don't want to go here, I have to do something different. And that's pretty brilliant at 18 to even like grasp that. So that's
I didn't
really,
have much I didn't have much brilliance in me, Lynn, but I did have certain things that I look back now on and thought, I am
yes.
so glad that I did it that way,
Yeah.
because sometimes in life, little things make all the difference. And those couple, two, three men that I got to know, I mean, they had no reason
Right.
to associate with me. One of them was a very successful businessman in town, and he called me up, and I didn't know who he was, and anyway, he came over a couple times a month for a lot of months and just to talk to me. And I always thought that was interesting, that I had nothing to offer him. I'm this 16,
Yeah.
17-year-old kid in a single parent household, poor, and he was the exact opposite. But I'm
Yeah.
glad that he took interest in me and wanted to at least help me in any way he could. And he gave me a lot of great advice.
So good. He saw something in you and he wanted to help develop those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So tell me about how you got into corporate finance. Was that like, did you major in
Yeah.
finance or
I,
economics? Oh, okay.
I did. I majored in finance and economics at Ohio State. And the interesting story about that goes back to when I was about 5 years old. My mother had been a bank teller in we didn't have, there wasn't a lot of things to do at home, but she would play with us. And one of the games that she used to play with us, we called it bank. Let's play bank. And so she made up this, cut out money and drew with crayons the denominations of it and everything. She taught me how to count change back. She was very precise. Today's world, you just get a handful of money back from the person at the restaurant or the fast food place. Back in the day, you had to count that
You
change
counted
in a
it. I
certain way.
remember. Yeah.
She was very precise about that, and we
Cool.
did that all the time. And it was her way, and looking back now, it was her way to keep my brain thinking about things. um, and we never had money. And so as I got older, I thought, I really need to learn. It's one of these things that I knew what I lacked. I really need to understand money because I don't have any. My mother never had any. And I don't want my future family to worry about, the stuff
Yeah.
that I worried about. And so when I finished or I was in the military and I got some of those educational benefits. The first day I walked into Ohio, I went to Ohio State. The first thing I did, I majored in finance, and that was another thing that I just thought it was really cool. And when I graduated from the bank or from Ohio State, I started interviewing. I interviewed with all the different banks and got into their one in particular was in Detroit, Comerica Bank. Moved to Detroit.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, moved, and I had two little kids and my wife at the time when I graduated, and we moved to Detroit, and I started in their commercial banking program. Went to school with them. They had a little several months of training in their
Mhm.
corporate banking training program. So that's how I got into it.
That's so great. Again, thank you, Air Force, because you had those
Oh yeah,
educational benefits.
yeah.
It did good by you. So
Oh
you
yeah, they
liked it
did.
and you just kept going. And now you're, pretty impressive. Your career's been pretty
Well,
impressive.
yeah, and I was on the just before our call, I was doing some calls with a couple of companies, but I've been doing this for 35 years now, and uh, experience is it's not like I'm this genius or anything. It's just like grinded through 35 years of seeing all sorts of things. And when you see things for 35 years, you people come to you and say, what do I do here? Well, I saw that 20 years ago and let's figure this
Yeah,
out.
it's great. That's why
Yeah,
you want to go to a doctor who's done a lot of operations. Yeah,
it's exactly right.
that's so cool. I noticed that too. It's just, I've been working, almost 35 years, and I just, most of the things people present me with at work, I have a story. I've done it. It's like, I don't always tell them the story. I have to stop myself. But, it does help to have those examples, all those examples in
Yeah,
your work life. And it gets easier. I mean, you just really have a lot to pull upon. And I love that you
right.
what do you do as far as leadership? One of your questions, the suggested question, was about what makes a good leader. I have a feeling you're a mentor. Just have a feeling that you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, it's something I give back, because of what happened to me. I know the value of being a mentor. I know the value of and the ability of what a leader does, and it's not being the person that orders others around. It's being a facilitator of learning and growth. And so those that work for me, even now, I don't, I tell them, hey, look, we're not in the banking business. We solve problems for people, we create opportunities for people, and we learn along the way. And my job is to help that go forward, and that you're in a world where you're learning and growing and you're helping other people to solve financial problems. But that's what a leader does. They're in the trenches with the folks, but
Yep.
they're there to help make sure that they keep moving forward and are getting everything out of their abilities that they can.
I love that. My favorite managers have always been supportive managers, and
Yeah,
they get it. Like they solve your problems and they're with you instead of, you
that's
know,
right.
from above.
That's
So,
right. That doesn't work.
well, I guess if you have enough fear and you're afraid, but who needs somebody who's afraid, right? It's
Yeah.
much more fun to all be in it together.
We're in it together and we all grow together.
I just love that. And I can't help but think that you're doing what they taught you way back when, those men. You're one of
That's
those men
it. It's
now.
exactly right. Yes, it's
What a
exactly
full
right.
circle moment.
It is. It is a full circle, and I do love it. I've trained a lot of bankers over the corporate bankers over the years, and it's really interesting and fulfilling to see a younger person that is trying to make their way and have somebody they can go to as a mentor. And it's very important to have a mentor. That's why young kids, I talk a lot about this in my book, the importance of fathers in the home, and
Yeah.
and because I know what it's like to not have that. And it's important to have those fathers that are advocates. I use the word advocate a lot. An advocate for a child from their father is so important. It lets them be okay to expand their horizon and their thinking and try things that are maybe hard, but with a little push from the dad and the mom, they achieve things that they didn't think was possible.
Yeah. That's a great thought. It's so true. And it makes such a difference. You can see when people don't have that, how they struggle.
Yeah,
And
it's very true.
we know some friends of our kids, they just had a tougher time. It's funny too when your kids grow up and they turn around and say to you, "Wow, we didn't realize you guys are pretty good parents."
Yeah,
I mean, not that
that's
we were like
right.
anything, we weren't anything special, but we were involved. You know what I mean? Like we were
Yes.
on their side and
Yeah.
supportive, and we put in a lot of time. And I always say you can't take credit if you have good kids, because then you got to take credit if you don't have good kids. So,
Right.
they're going to
That's
grow the
right.
way they grow, but we tried really hard to support them, and they came to that awareness. It was such a sweet moment when they both said it. They both went to college, and they said, "We've heard some stories."
Yeah.
Because some parents
Yeah.
just aren't maybe ready to be parents. Is like what we
Yeah,
heard.
that's right. That's
And the
right.
same thing that you're saying. You wish those parents had had support. You know, I always say when I meet someone, I can see they were raised by loving people. I can
Yeah.
tell. by
Yeah.
how they treat people, by how they are. And, it's certainly true of you. Like you could just see the influences coming through.
Yeah.
And what a, what a beautiful, testament, the way you came around now and became one of those mentors. I think this is an A+ story. I
Yeah,
like it a lot.
and I appreciate that. Yeah, my wife has been as influential because we've been together. We've known each other since the 7th grade. We started dating right at the end of our senior year in high school,
I love
and
that.
she's been with me. And I confidently say she's been the most influential person in my life because of her family. We grew up on different sides of the tracks, if you will. And so I'm shocked that she married me, but she has
Oh,
been very influential, and not only to me, but to our kids
yeah.
and the grandkids that we now have. And so it's not just men. Men were very influential to me because I didn't have any in my life,
Right.
but
Right.
my wife then became influential in showing me things about the world that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so it's very important for the spousal relationship to be tied like a knot.
And I think it's just so good if you're a team, because
Yeah.
that works so well for the kids and obviously worked well for you guys. Is there anything
Yes.
else you'd like to share with us? Is there anything we didn't cover that you'd like to add?
Well, the only thing I would add is, as people live their lives, I think people try and be as comfortable as they can in their life, but that's the opposite of what needs to happen. I had to do things. The more I did hard things, and it stretched me to the point where I was very uncomfortable, I learned to do that. It was the best thing for me. So people just need to not put themselves in everyday comfort. Put yourself in a place that makes
Mm.
you uncomfortable by stretching yourself to do good things. Try things you've never tried before, and doors open up when you do that.
That's such good advice. And I've heard that elsewhere. I'm really impressed with that piece of advice. It just seems like you can't grow unless you're, on the edge of being uncomfortable. That's what
Yes.
leads to growth. Um, and I think I want to order your book. We can get it on Amazon. Is that
Oh
how you
yeah, you
get
can
it?
get it on Amazon. You can get it on, it's on audio. You can get a hard copy, or you can get it
Hmm.
on an audio version of it. It's really good on an audio. So um, either one.
Fantastic. And also, how can people get in touch with you? I mean, I'll put all this in the show notes, but some people
Sure.
I just want to make sure they hear how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, and this is an important question also. I'm always willing to help people. And so it's very simple. Jan dot Ackley, Ackley at gmail.com. That's my personal email. If you get anybody that wants to email me with a question, comment, needs some advice, anything like that, email
That's
away.
that's great. All right. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you. And I know people will be inspired by your story, and you just never know who's listening, who
Yeah,
needs to hear it.
and I appreciate it. That's why I do these, is
Yeah.
because life can be hard, and it is hard for a lot of people, and everyday people. And you go through periods, and I just want to do a little bit, if I can, to help
Yeah.
somebody.
I think that's great. One of the reasons I started this podcast is I was like, you go through something and you learn something. What's the point if you don't share it? Like that's the beauty of it. You share it.
Exactly right.
That's really
Yes.
that's the next step, right? Because it's not as fulfilling, it's not as fun if you can't share what you learned. And
Yeah.
and I firmly believe you can learn from other people's mistakes. You don't have to make every single mistake yourself. And
It's so true. I've made so many mistakes, and I try and tell my kids, before you do that, ask me first, because if there's some error to be made, I
I
made
can tell you, yeah,
it.
because I've been there. I've done them all. All right. Well,
Yes.
you have a great day. Thanks again for sharing your story.
My pleasure. Thanks,
Really
Lynn.
appreciate it.
See ya.